Hey everyone, Cell here with something a little bit different. In this video, I'll be discussing how to craft endgame fractured gear in solo self-found. And not strictly endgame, I will have some lower end methods in the mix as well, because they're all pretty similar, you just stop at different points. So this is a method you can use from the start of your solo self-found mapping progress to the complete endgame where you're taking on Ubers and things like that, as I have been. So, a couple of example items here before we start. All of these items I'm showing today are items I have made myself and are sitting in my stash on my character as we speak. So on the left, we have a helmet. It's got fractured spell suppression. It's got a life mana regen hybrid unveil. It's got chaos res. It's got mana reservation efficiency from an essence. And it's got Fifth Stake in his fire. The Eldritch implicits are not finished. One of them is good, the other is not for my build, so that still has some work to be done, but that's the last step anyways, so this is essentially a finished item apart from the extra little sprinkle on top there. And on the right side, very similarly speaking, but the implicits are finished. We have Fractured Cold Res, we've got Spell Suppression, Lightning Res, a Movement Speed, and Movement Speed if you haven't been hit recently, Hybrid Mod, again from an Unveil, and Crafted Life with finished implicits. So let's talk about the general process. You start by finding an item with a fractured suffix from rare mob conversion. Typically from rare mob conversion anyways. There are other sources of fractured items, but currently that's the biggest one. And it does have to be a suffix specifically for this method. You could do it with the prefix, but this method is more tailored towards suffixes specifically. You then use an essence that gives you a suffix. Again, has to be a suffix in this case. That's more strict than the fracture. There's some leeway on the fracture, but if you're using this method specifically, you really want it to be a suffix that the essence is granting. You'll then aim to hit a third suffix that is neither from the fracture or the essence, so that suffixes are completely finished. You'll then do suffixes cannot be changed on the bench, which is a prefix, and either Veiled Chaos or Ashling. I mentioned Scouring here because that is an option if you wanted to do something insane, like repeatedly Exalt for a specific mod, but I would not recommend that at all, really. Another alternative is Harvest Reforging. That's not an add remove, but a straight reforge, and that could potentially be good as well, depending on the mod you're wanting to have as your prefix. And then lastly, you finish with a Benchcraft and Eldritch implicits, and if you have room, and Exalt as well, if you have the Exalts to spare. Then if you end up filling your prefixes with a Veiled Chaos, you can end up fixing them with Eldritch Chaos or a risky annulment. So as a general recap, the materials required for those steps in order are fractured items, which you can get from various league mechanics. I've been doing a lot of Harbinger, and I've gotten most of my tier 1 and tier 2 fractured mods from that. Legion is good, Abyss is also very good. Then you have essences. I would reserve Deafening if you have them for any higher end crafts you're doing. If you're just dabbling a little bit or making like some makeshift gear for your character that you're going to end up replacing later, definitely stick to Screaming or Shrieking. Then you're going to need some Divines for the meta Benchcraft mods. You'll need some Veiled Chaos or Ashling in Research. Then, as the contingency, you'll need some Eldritch Chaos in case things go wrong. In the crafts I mentioned before, I did not personally have to fix my prefixes, but I got lucky. I believe it's about a 1 in 12 to fill your prefixes, and in that case, if you don't have mods that you want in prefixes, you'll either have to start over or risk an annulment, or the safest option is to Eldritch Chaos it. And then you finish it off by bench crafting and getting your Eldritch implicits. And now some important notes. You can stop at pretty much any point in this process. If you're using essences on a fractured item, that is not only the starting point, but it can also be the ending point, depending on what kind of item you want, how high your bar is for a good item. If you're super early in the league, you might be happy hitting one other good mod and then throwing a benchcraft on it, and that's perfectly fine. There's also room for progressive crafting with this method. What I mean by that is you can finish out your suffixes. You have your fractured mod, your essence mod, and your random suffix that you wanted. And you have some open prefixes, or some maybe less good mods and one open prefix. So you benchcraft a prefix that you like, and you just leave it for then. You come back later. You can then pick it up once you have some more materials or a higher need for a certain stat, and then at that point you can use your Veiled Chaos and what have you. There are also multiple ways of finishing items with varying degrees of risk. It really depends on whether you want 2 or 3 good prefixes and which prefixes you want. If you want, for example, some boots with good suffixes and a freeze immunity mod and a chill immunity movement speed hybrid mod and life, that's going to be quite a bit more difficult than just getting chill immunity movement speed and life, or freeze immunity movement speed life. Because at that point, you're reliant on getting an extra mod from the Veiled Chaos, and a specific mod at that. This method is also primarily useful for boots, helmets, gloves, and body armors because of the fallback of Eldritch Chaos. You can use it for other items, but you won't have the potential to use Eldritch Chaos to reset prefixes, which means that it's a lot higher risk crafting an item that you can't do that on. Now I'll go over some examples of the types of items you might craft with a low-end, middle tier, and higher-end setup for this. So in this example, this is pretty much just essence crafting, except on a fractured item. If you're familiar with essence crafting from early league starts, as a lot of solo self-find players are, it's a very powerful mechanic because essences guaranteeing a mod makes it significantly easier to hit a combination of mods that you want, or hitting multiple good mods just by nature of guaranteeing one of them. When you do that on a fractured item, it becomes exponentially easier again, because now you're guaranteeing 2 mods effectively instead of 1. So in this case, threw a couple essences at an item, just for the sake of example. Cold resistance essence until I got life, and then said, alright, now I'm going to craft a movement speed prefix. Up in the mid tier here, these are the boots I've been using on my character for the longest time, which is why they still have gems in them. And I didn't actually craft them using this method, but this is an example of something you could get out of the mid-tier investment of this method. So again, I didn't craft these with this method, but if I did, what I would have done is found the fractured base, in this case with a fairly low tier spell suppression, use either cold or lightning resist essences until I hit the other mod at a tier that I was comfortable with. And in this case, I would have said, okay, it's got 40 life. I'm strapped for currency because I'm still fairly early into the league. So I'm just going to craft movement speed, and I'm not going to Veiled Chaos or Ashling reroll the prefixes. I'm just going to stick with it as it is. In this case, you'll end up with as many as 5 desirable mods, but they might not be at the tier that you want. So in this case, again, I have 2 mods that are good tier, the resistances. The spell suppression and life could definitely be higher. Could want in the range of like 60, 70 plus life, and more ideally 11 or 12 spell suppression. And the movement speed is crafted, so that's obviously something unfortunate about it instead of being a veiled hybrid movement speed modifier. This can be a bit of an awkward investment spot, but like I mentioned before, this can be a progressive craft where, say I didn't get life on this and had a defense modifier instead, or I got hybrid life and only had like 27 life. I could still use these for a while until I got to the point where I wanted to reroll the prefixes. Apologies for the awkward pause there. Anyways, moving on. And here is a hiring example. These are boots I crafted recently and a pair I plan on using on my character to replace the previous boots once I have a couple other items I need to make the switch. And in this case, you'll end up with 5 or 6 desirable mods, those being the Fractured mod, the Essence mod, a desired suffix that's random, a Veiled modifier, a Benchcraft, and a potential random 6th mod, either from the Veiled Chaos Orb or from exalting it. In this case, I believe I exalted them, but I could be wrong about that. And as I mentioned before, you do need the full suite of items for this. That'd be a Fractured item, plenty of essences, a Veiled Chaos Orb or Ashling, and some Eldritch Chaos as a contingency plan. And that is pretty much the method. If you have any questions, definitely let me know down in the comments. And as one last thing, I will head over to Craft of Exile and show that this does have reasonable rates, which is one of the things that makes it useful for solo Southbound. You're not going to be throwing hundreds of essences at an item before you see something good. So let's jump over there and show that. So here we are in Craft of Exile. We have an item level 85 pair of Dex Intelligence gloves. 85 because if you're doing tier 16 maps and getting a fractured item from a level 83 mob, it'll be item level 85. And let's say we got fractured tier 1 cold resistance. If you don't know how to fracture in Craft of Exile, click this fracture button up here, find the mod, right click it. And then say we want to go for tier 2 spell suppression. That's going to put us at a 1 in 82 on average essences with a suffix in order to hit that spell suppression. Now, you might be tempted to look at a different essence, you know. Say you use greed. You're rolling life, you have more open suffixes as potential to roll spell suppression. So it's a 1 in 47. That's better, right? Not quite. Because if you're going to use the Veiled Chaos method, you're going to get rid of either your prefixes or your suffixes. And in this case, we've been targeting re-rolling the prefixes after this point. So you either get rid of the life you just got, or you're going to settle for an item that has life and spell suppression, and potentially nothing else other than those two in the Fractured mod. So instead, you stick to an essence that gives a suffix the rates appear worse than they really are. It will take you more essences to hit the mods you want, but once you get those mods, those suffixes are locked in. And I've been mentioning Eldritch Chaos. If you're not familiar with Eldritch Chaos orbs, they are pretty rare. You can get them at a higher frequency by killing the Eldritch bosses, including Exarch and Eater, but also the mini bosses before them, the Black Star and Infinite Hunger. So if you've accumulated any of those invitations, you can do like an Alk and Go sort of boss fight, and that might help you get some. They are fairly rare though. That said, most of the time, you won't need Eldritch Chaos Orbs. They're really just there as a fallback. And if you need to use that fallback, the reason you finish your Eldritch Implicits last is to make sure no mistake is made regarding the dominance. So you'll see Eldritch Chaos Orb here says, if the Searing Exarch is dominant, reroll prefix modifiers. That means the tier of Eldritch Implicit on the item for the Searing Exarch is higher than the one for the Eater of Worlds. If only one influence type is on the item, then whatever influence type that is dominant, and you don't even have to worry about it. So you throw on any Searing Exarch modifier. If there's no Eater of Worlds modifier, then the Searing Exarch is dominant, and you will reroll prefixes. If you're working on an item that, for whatever reason, already has modifiers, what you can do is use a lesser Eater of Worlds modifier on it, Iker, rather, to get a lesser tier modifier. That's the lowest one. And then use a greater or higher Searing Exarch Ember on it. And that will guarantee that the Searing Exarch is dominant. And I suppose I'll do a bit of a demonstration as to how I might craft some gloves for myself. This is on a hybrid base, Evasion ES. If you're after spell suppression specifically, suppression has twice the weighting on pure evasion bases. But if you need the energy shield or the base for some other reason, then that's a point of consideration as well. Now these gloves, I just got tier 1 life and tier 2 accuracy. Those might be totally usable for your build or another build that you're thinking about playing. So again, a potentially good stopping point here. But we'll keep going, trying to go after what I had in mind, which was the suppression type. Again here, 2 tier 1 suffixes might be good enough for you. Keep going here. And I might end up skipping a bit until I find something interesting, and we can keep track over here. Hopefully that's visible enough on the video. And here we are, 29 essences in. That's quite lucky. We have 2 open prefixes. If you do hit the suffixes you want and you fill prefixes, you can again use an Eldritch Chaos. In this case, because I hit tier 1 suppression, I probably would not want to re-roll this. So I would, if I didn't have an Eldritch Chaos, probably hold this item until the point that I did. And again, potentially good jumping off point here, because there's room for Crafted Life. I can call this a double res tier 1 spell suppression item with 65 to 70 life, depending on how much I want to reroll the bench mod, and call that good for now. And then at some point in the future, if I want the suffix to be a little better, because this is definitely the type of item that you could use long term, you could also do something like Harvest Craft the fire res into lightning res, for example. So there's some flexibility there. You can go ahead and suffixes cannot be changed. You can veil chaos. And in this case, I got a single veiled prefix. And I think this is pretty well known at this point in time, but in case you are unaware, you can block veiled modifiers by crafting a modifier before you do the unveiling. So what I mean by that is, say you don't want this regen mod as one of your potential options. You can click into that. You can see increased mana. You can go in and craft this modifier on the item, and it can no longer unveil as this modifier because it already has that modifier and it can't have it twice. Keep in mind, though, that you can only block the ones that say chosen, because those are the general veiled mods, versus something like this, Varichi's. You can only get this by unveiling items that Varichi dropped. Or Brine Rot. You can only get this by unveiling items that Guff dropped. Some things also overlap, and it's not necessarily the most obvious thing. For example, I believe all of the physical to elemental conversion mods share the same family, even though it doesn't say that. So by crafting one of these, I'll block a total of 6,000 weighting of the available veiled prefixes. There's another 4,000 tied up here in character-specific mods, which means it cuts the amount of available modifiers down significantly, and then you're being shown 3 of them, so there's pretty decent odds that you'll get shown something usable. Now, of course, if you want one of these mods to be unveiled, don't block that one. In this case, I think we will go ahead and block one of those. I could be wrong about this, by the way, and I could find out right now. Or if you know a bit more about that, let me know down in the comments. And then we'll simply unveil this. And it does seem I was wrong about that. Either way, though, this is actually a pretty solid unveil. If I hadn't crafted cold and one of these was cold, I would probably personally do that myself, even if I wasn't going to use this for the character I'm playing now, which is a minion build. Maybe I do a fizz to cold build, and it's nice to have the extra conversion there on this prefix. In this case, we got hybrid life and mana regen, so I'm going to unveil that. And then at this point, because I'm playing a minion build, I might be wrong about this actually. Nope, minion damage is a prefix, so I'll craft that, and then you just recraft as many times as you're comfortable until you hit a max roll or whatever you're comfortable with. And at this point, we have an item with what looks like 5 tier 1s, but it's really 3 tier 1. Pretty solid veiled modifier. Life and regen isn't the best. Boots have it a lot better with the various movement speed bonuses they have. And then a crafted prefix that we like. And at this point could also exalt and hit mana, because it's like the thing I always hit. And at this point you use Eldritch currency to add whatever implicits you want. Well, that was a fairly long video. I hope you found it informative or entertaining in some way. Not a lot of gameplay in this one, but mostly just discussion of crafting mechanics and how you can leverage them. If you found it helpful, I would much appreciate a like, comment, or subscription. Let me know if you liked or disliked anything about this video down below, and I'll try to do better next time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Peace.